Welcome to the Early Edge College Football Pick Show, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I am your host, Eric Cohen. It's conference championship week, and unfortunately, there are only 9 FBS games in week 15, but the good news is that we'll have picks for all of them on this episode. So let's bring in the experts and get right to it. As always, the great handicapper, M-Squared, Mike McClure, is with us. The master of the upside, who should have added a plus 800 to his resume last week with Georgia Tech over Georgia. So close, Emory Hunt. So close. That was a great pick. And from the Cover 3 podcast, before he heads to Indianapolis this week, the one, the only, Chip Patterson. All right, well, we got the college football playoff rankings, the last rankings show that they put out last night before recording this. So it's time for some college football playoff overreactions. Emory, we're going to start with you. I have no idea that you could possibly be saying anything about the SEC this week. Oh, wait, you are. Do tell.
Well, it's the SEO, as we know in, these internet worlds. But the reason why I put SEOC is because we know at the end of the day, the reason why we are seeing Alabama ahead of Miami is because it's ratings. Although if you include Miami, they can also have the ratings and have their cake and eat it too. And I would also say this before I pass it off. I mean, we're talking about conference championship weekend, and what more intrigue will we have been able to add to these games this weekend if all of these teams in these conference championships were playing for a spot in the postseason? It's not that complicated. We see it at the FCS, D2, D3, NAIA levels. If you win your conference, you get the automatic bid. If they were able to do that, expand the field to 20, and therefore you could have your 10 at large bids that you can put in your, SEC 5-loss teams. And we don't care. We just want to make sure all conference champions get a seat at the table. So when coach is talking to these guys in the winter, in workouts, in the spring, during practice, and say, hey, we got a chance to go to the national championship, he really means it.
I don't even know where you guys want to go with this one. Mike, I'll let you start on. I mean, Louisiana had a great year. Tulane's had a great year. I would keep them far away from the playoff. All right, Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, look, you could argue you put them in the playoff. They've had great seasons. They would get beat in those games for sure. Now, the thing that I have a problem with is Miami being sandwiched between Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, right? It just seems like they're just moving things around kind of for fun in that particular instance. It's either Miami's record and Miami's performance puts them above the 3-loss SEC teams, or it puts them below. When you put them in between there, I don't agree with that, because I think the gap between Bama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss as 3-loss teams is essentially negligible. I think they're all great teams. So with Miami, you either put them above those 3-loss teams and you put them in and reward having a better record, or Miami needs to be below all 3 of those SEC teams. So for me, I'm not surprised. We've been talking about it for the last month that Alabama was going to find a way in, really, no matter how this thing shook out. And I think that's exactly what's happened here.
And the selection committee chair, Ward Manuel, the athletic director at Michigan, gave the game away on television when he sat there and he was like, well, there's nothing that could happen that would make us want to change our mind on that, which is to say that Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, and South Carolina are locked in place, even though their strength of schedules could be adjusted, their resumes could be adjusted, their profiles could be adjusted based on what happens. I mean, Alabama's profile gets better if Georgia wins the SEC championship, because now your best win is against the SEC champion. Your profile gets worse if Texas blows Georgia out of the water. There are so many pieces to this, which are, apparently just not even going to matter, that I kind of felt like that was, to your point, Mike, it was theatrics. Like, we're just going to put Miami in there so that they feel like they're close, even though there's no reason for them to be right there in the midst of those trio of SEC teams.
Emory, I want to circle back to you. In a perfect world, how many teams make the playoff?
20. 10 conference champions and 10 at-larges. Am I saying you guys looking at the wrong way? Am I saying that, let's say in the FCS, the University of San Diego would beat North Dakota State in a playoff game? No, we've seen that play out before. North Dakota State trounced San Diego, but the fact that they have a right at the table to lose that game is all we're saying. So you mean to tell me in a one-game scenario, teams know they can go to the postseason, a Western Kentucky or Louisiana or, Army or Tulane couldn't beat someone in a one game season scenario, this is what makes college football special, what makes it great. So if you're going to have a playoff, that tells me everyone that plays in the conference should get an opportunity to go into the postseason, because that would make every game matter during the regular season, although it already does. But imagine the hype, and imagine how much people will tune into Maction knowing that Ohio or Miami of Ohio, if they win the conference, has a chance to go play someone in the postseason.
Mike?
Yeah, I would say I would like to see it expanded again just to 16. Do away with the buys and then take the field and seed the field 1 through 16 like the March Madness tournament, regardless of whether or not you win the actual conference tournament. If you win the conference tournament or win the conference game, you're in no matter what. It's an auto bid in that sense. But after that, I think they should seed it 1 through 16, essentially off of rating. And that way this season, look, there are 6 SEC teams for sure that are of the caliber of a national title contender, right? We're not going to get 6 in, we're going to get 4, but there are 6 of them, in my opinion, that definitely could win. And if it were like a March Madness style tournament, would be absolutely live to essentially make a national title game. So if I were to do it, I would do away with the buys, just have the 16 teams, seed them, and let it play out like that.
To Mike's point, I hate the seeding right now, because let's say Clemson beats SMU, let's say, Big 12 champ or but 1 spot apart. We could be looking at a final rankings 1 through 25 where, Clemson and the Big 12 champ are 1 spot apart. One of those teams goes to the 4 seed. One of those teams is the 12. That is ridiculous. Like, that is the idea that you'd be separated by 1 spot, and yet one of you has to go play the highest ranked non-champ, and the other one gets a bye all the way to the quarterfinals. That is not an equitable bracketing format, if you ask me.
Let's be honest. The playoff is kind of broken if Arizona State and Boise State are both getting byes, and the likes of Ohio State, Penn State or Oregon, Georgia or Texas are not. That's where I have an issue. The other problem, go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
I'm looking at the bracket. It's insane. You look at the potential right now, Notre Dame, Alabama, the winner of that game gets SMU, definitely going to be favored in it. Penn State, Arizona State. If Penn State beats Arizona State, they're going to be a 10-point favorite over Boise walking into that semi. Meanwhile, if you're Oregon and have dominated this season, you get rewarded with Ohio State or Tennessee. And if you're Georgia and you beat Indiana, you get rewarded with another matchup against Texas. I think they definitely should be reseeding the team.
Reseeding, yeah, and I think that's the answer. So here's my big takeaway from the rankings: the SMU conundrum. So we're going to penalize SMU for going 11-1 and losing to Clemson in the ACC championship game, but at the same time, we're going to let Indiana skate by at 11-1 and basically with no good wins. Their best wins against Michigan, who, albeit went 7-5 and beat Ohio State last week in a shocker, but outside of that, where are the big wins for Indiana? The second biggest is Nebraska. Now, you got to play who's on your schedule, but we also have to reward teams for beefing up their non-conference. Indiana did not. They scheduled it like a joke. There's no team. I mean, I couldn't even tell you who they played in non-conference because it was embarrassing, right? I mean, Chip, you probably know their schedule offhand. As far as I'm concerned, Indiana should be out. SMU should be locked in. Not that they had played the greatest schedule of all time either. The ACC, Miami and SMU got breaks. I just think SMU is more deserving.
I'll just jump in and say this. Yeah. I will say this to jump in and interject. We do know recently Alabama played Mercer. That's all I'm saying. Like, we can't act like Indiana's schedule is what it is, and the SEC doesn't have an FCS invitational.
But they also season. Okay, and that's fair. I'll give you that. But Alabama also went to Wisconsin, who, albeit was worse than people expected, but that's still on paper most years a top 25 caliber game, right? On the road at Wisconsin.
All I hear saying, EC, is it is hard to go undefeated and it's hard to win games. So you got to give teams credit for winning those games.
My thing with Indiana, and I found myself kind of stepping in this recently. I was doing a radio hit with a friend, and he was like trying to pin me down. He was like, "Why are you so in the bag for the Big Ten?" And I was like, "I don't know. I think Indiana is really, really good." And I was mad that I couldn't, call up all the information that I wanted to call up, because the fact of the matter is, and we're all about, the wagering angle, the best bets angle. Indiana has, I think, the best cover. Yeah. No one has covered the spread by a larger margin per game this year than Indiana. They are covering the spread by a whopping 14 points per game. They have covered the spread 75% of the time. They have exceeded expectations. They play, it's how you play, not who you play. They have played a soft schedule. That is true. But they have kicked their asses all up and down this schedule. And so when you only have a 1 in that loss column and you've got 11 in the wins column, and they aren't just cheap wins, they have been thorough beatdowns. I mean, I felt like I stepped in it because I was like, I don't know, Adam. I've watched almost every Indiana game. They are a really, really good football team. They play through the whistle. They do assignment football. Like they're well coached and they execute. I would like to see Indiana in that college football playoff. I understand SMU would be furious about it. I understand that if, somebody else, Miami is probably furious about it as well. How is Indiana in there and we're left out? But Indiana has looked like a better team more consistently, albeit against a weaker schedule than Miami has, which has played with its food and has had 3 double-digit second-half comebacks and needed 2 ACC office call-in the bat phone reviews to be able to make sure that they were still undefeated earlier in the year.
Yeah, but SMU's getting hosed if they lose to Clemson this week. And that was just my whole point. I would put SMU with 2 losses in over Indiana with 1. If we're talking who do I think is the better team, that's what it's all about. All right, we're going to pick all 9 games this week. And you can bet those at BetMGM. New BetMGM customers can sign up today and get up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Just place your first wager of at least $10, and you'll receive up to $1,500 instantly if your bet loses with bonus code EDGE. That's EDGE EDGE. Coming up next, we'll preview the 3 Friday games after we hear from one of our sponsors.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
Let us start in Conference USA on Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have a rematch of what we saw in Week 14. It's Jacksonville State, this time hosting Western Kentucky, and Jacksonville State is giving 3.5 to the Hilltoppers. The total is 57.5. Emory, we saw Western Kentucky win this game 19-17 last week. Which way are you leaning this week?
This is interesting because this is where the balance for Western Kentucky can pose a problem. We know Jacksonville State with Trey Stewart and also their quarterback Tyler Huff, the run game is going to be prominent. But if they get down, can you trust just a one-dimensional offense in Jacksonville State? Because they need the balance. And I feel like Western Kentucky has the formula to where they can play good opportunistic defense. And the biggest thing for Western Kentucky that stood out to me was when they played Sam Houston. And Sam Houston had a very good defense at the time, and they were able to throw the football and then be opportunistic, get that one stop to steal a possession away, and they got the win. I feel like that's going to be the case again here, which is why I'm going with the Hilltoppers plus 3.5.
Mike, how do you feel about that?
I lean that direction here. It just the number being 3.5 and not 3 or 2.5 here. I think we get another competitive game. I know it's always difficult to run it back and beat someone twice like that. And I will acknowledge the fact that the game didn't mean as much to Jacksonville State last week as it obviously does this week. Now, when I look at everything here with Emory, though, I think it's going to be a competitive game. So I think at 3.5, you have to lean with the points. If this were, say, 1.5 or 2, I would be leaning the other way pretty easily. But at 3.5, just the key number here.
Chip, 36 points last week, and now we got 57.5 as a total. What's up with that?
Yeah, well, we talked about the motivation. And just to, a throwback here for EC, I'm just going to say that this is a lean right here, lean one way. Lean to the other. I think I like points. I think a lot about Rich Rodriguez, and I think a lot about something that I heard a coach talk about when you started to have rematches really pop up. This was actually back in the Big 12, where it was Gary Patterson talking about Lincoln Riley. He said it's hard enough to game plan to stop this guy once. If he gets one look at you and then gets to go again, you don't stand a chance. And I think about Western Kentucky having, pretty good defensive game plan for Jacksonville State. We mentioned that they probably were running a spring game playbook or something like it, but they at least had to show their cards, which means Rich Rod now gets a second crack at him, which means he's got the counters, which means he's got ways to be able to go out there and find a little bit of avenues for success. So I do think that there's going to be more offensive success, even with our Tyler Huff injury issues and concerns. I think that we're still going to see a team playing at home be able to run the ball effectively, be able to score more points than they did in that game in Bowling Green just last week. Now, on the other side, Western Kentucky moved the ball, but did not do a good job of finishing drives. I mean, that 19-17 is 4 field goals getting you all the way home. I think that similarly, Western Kentucky has more success finishing off those drives. And so you turn some of those field goal opportunities into touchdowns. You have more production from the Gamecocks. It's just a lean because I also was looking at Jacksonville State team total, which was around 30.5 or so. That maybe felt a little high, but I do think we could end up seeing more points here. So I'll go over 57.5.
Yeah, this one is not a lean for me. This is a strong play. I'm going the over 57.5.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, there we go. But I need Tyler Huff to play, the starting quarterback for Jacksonville State. 1,176 yards rushing this season, 13 touchdowns. We know he's hobbled. He got hurt in the second half last week, ankle injury. The odds makers, and Chip, you and I talked about this before the show, the assumption is that he's going to play. Yeah. But how effective will he be? I'm going to say he's okay. Now, if it comes down to Logan Smothers, he wasn't good at Nebraska, he's not great at Jacksonville State, then I'm not as confident. But assuming Huff starts, and I'm waiting to bet this until the last minute, I'm going to play this over 57.5. Western Kentucky on the road, give up 31 a game. At home, they give up 13.5 a game. They're on the road this week. A Rich Rod offense, give me that over 57.5. Feel good about that one. Go ahead, Chip.
And if you want to watch the Cayusa Conference Championship, you can do it on CBS Sports Network. Rich Waltz, Robert Turbin, and Amanda Guerra on the call.
I love the promo. There you go. All right, let's talk the Mountain West Championship game. I know we're going to have some strong opinions about this one, including a couple of disagreements. UNLV and Boise State are rematching, not only from a game we saw 29-24 earlier this year, but we saw them in the championship game last year in Las Vegas, a 44-20 Boise State win. This game Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Boise State is giving forward to UNLV with a total of 58.5. Chip, you're on one side, Emory's on the other. Tell us who you're leaning this week.
Oh, yeah. Let's get the fighting gloves out. All right. So I went back to that first game, 29-24, and I looked at the way that UNLV played defense against Boise State. And UNLV, like schematically, kind of pitched a perfect game. Ashton Jeanty was held to about 120 some odd yards. He only had 1 rushing touchdown, and it was a little 1-yard plunge right at the very end, early fourth quarter. And he had 0 rushes of 20 yards or more. I mean, one of the reasons why Ashton Jeanty's been able to rack up all these yards is because of those 50-yard, 40-yard, you rip off those long ones, you can start accumulating yards really quickly. UNLV did an awesome job of being able to just keep everything in front of them, make Madsen throw it 33 times, and just play roulette with their passing game. But they still lost. And they still lost because Boise State's defense was able to get after Haj Malik Williams, 6 sacks in that game. They weren't able to block enough for Ricky White to be able to get open for those downfield passes, which I do think is going to be UNLV's key to winning this game. It being in Albertson Stadium in Boise, Idaho on the Smurf turf is something that I do think is significant, especially when we're thinking about, who is going to be feeling at home, in their pads in this spot. Is it the boys who play in Allegiant Stadium, or is it the boys that are the home team right there? I got Boise. I will lay the 4. I just think that UNLV played the perfect game early and still lost in their building. Why do I think that they're going to be able to do it again on the road?
Emory, I know you like UNLV here, just to spoil your pick, but we don't want to see them in the playoff, do we?
If they earned the right to be there, I want to see them because again, now you have the unfamiliarity of the offense going up against whoever they're going to be slated to play, in the round 1 matchup. So I welcome it. And the reason why I like UNLV is because Chip laid it out perfectly. Their run defense, and I've been saying this all year long about Ashton Jeanty in that ground game for Boise State. You got to beat him to the line of scrimmage because while he does have good burst explosiveness and he's able to bust through every tackle that comes his way, he doesn't create pre-line of scrimmage. What I'm saying is you have to get his feet to stop. If you get his feet to stop moving and he doesn't have a full head of steam, he doesn't change and threaten the backside defender, which is what UNLV did. They were just aggressive in their run fits and played the front side run because there was no backside threat of him cutting it back against the grain, making a guy miss, and then shooting out the back door. If you play front side defense rather well, you're going to get stops, which is why he didn't have that run over 20 yards. And offensively, they had a couple of turnovers. And I feel like they'll play a cleaner game knowing that they have the confidence of stopping them on defense. So that's why I like UNLV to go on the road and get the dub.
Mike, it's always good when I agree with your picks. You know, like it just feels better in life when I'm going to submit my bet slip and Mike and I are on the same side. Which side are we leaning in this game?
It's got to be the over here for me, EC. You know, I was expecting this number to be in the low to mid 60s here. When I look at this particular setup, first of all, the first matchup was 29-24, and that was with Boise State getting just a field goal in the first quarter of that game. Now, I do think being at home, Boise is going to be able to control the tempo a bit and score. But I see this game being one of those classic 34-31, 34-30 kind of games where I don't think you can rule out overtime as well. I just think it's going to be a competitive matchup back and forth. And the fact that if one of these teams gets to 31-34, I think we're very, very live to get there. So at 58.5, I know it's a big, big number in a very important game. But to me, I think that there's still going to be big play after big play in this game. We might see some success at times defensively, but I think you have to respect the upside that's on the field in this matchup. So considering this is 58.5 and not 62.5, I'm going to be going over here.
I'm going to go over as well because Boise State at home this season averaging 47 points a game. In last year's title game, there were 64 combined points, and I don't think either of these teams offensively were as good as they are this year. I mean, you could make the argument that UNLV was, obviously, but it's close. Boise State, I think, obviously is better. UNLV, though, since 2023 is averaging 33 points a game on the road. This spread's kind of weird to me in that we saw a 4.5-point line in Vegas earlier in the year. Now the spread is closer in Boise. So I kind of want to stay away from that. I think Boise will win this game, but I'm staying away from that. I'm going Boise State 35, UNLV 31 in this game. All right, let's talk about one where, I mean, there's going to be some agreement. We're going to hear a Chip sound effect. Just get it ready, Chip. Tulane and Army. Now, this line has been all over the board this week. Started at 4.5, went up to 6, went back down to 4.5. It's at Army. The total is 45.5. This game is Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Mike, we're going to start with you. Which side are you leaning?
I lean Army. Definitely liked it a lot more at 6. You have to question the motivation a little bit on both sides. I mean, I know there's some disappointment, less so on the Army side. I think that they obviously wanted to beat Notre Dame. I think we knew that was going to be a tough task. The thing that I am concerned about for Army is just the game coming up after that is more important to them, right? So that to me is the only cause for concern on the Army side. For Tulane, I think when you look at the way they lost that last game and everything has kind of slipped through the fingertips here, that's where I kind of think that there's a little bit of a letdown spot here. The contrast in the style of play a bit. I think Army's going to be able to possess the football a ton here, really work that clock, which means we're likely seeing a competitive 1-score game. So through key numbers at 4.5, again, I loved it at 6. If it gets back to 6, definitely play it there. I don't think you're at risk of it going any lower. So I think if you want to wait closer to kickoff, I think it's fine. But I'll be on the Army side here.
Emory, you, of course, will agree. We know you love Army.
Well, they're going to go from the green wave to the green glaciers out because it's going to be cold out there Friday.
Thank you.
This game, and I don't know if you've ever been to Mikey Stadium, but it's right on the water. And so, I mean, they won't be as cold as Bob Hayes was against the Packers in the Ice Bowl. No one will ever be that cold. But Tulane will be out there. You'll see packs of Green Wave players on the sideline, huddled up because it's going to be they trying to generate body heat. So that's number one. And number two, the run game and how physical Army is on defense. Everything is going to hurt. So every carry and every time you tackle, it's going to hurt Tulane. And if you're not used to playing, in that weather consistently and being physical, not to say Tulane can't be physical because they do have a power spread type offense, man. But this game, whether it was at 6, 4.5, 4, I'm taking Army plus the points here because, again, night on the river and it's December. Good luck, Tulane.
I mean, listen, you sold me. I've seen snow 5 times in my life. Seriously, I don't know anything about snow. I've never been in weather colder than 25 degrees. So everything you just said is like a foreign language to me. All right, Chip, you also, let's hear it, I guess.
All right, so number one, like great minds here. So 26 degrees with 10 to 15 mile an hour winds howling off the water. And it's not just like it is, as Emory mentioned, it is the hits, it is the tackles, it is the cut blocks as these defenders are coming and just chopping at you. Everything is going to hurt. And look, Emory has spent some time up in the Northeast, but so he's gotten his blood ready for it. But I don't know if the rest of those Louisiana boys are ready for what they're about to face when they get up to West Point. Here's what I'm concerned about, though, and why I'm also tacking on an under. John Summerall, the Tulane head coach, excellent against triple option and triple option concepts. Navy shutout earlier this season. When he was back at Troy, they even played Army, and Troy had to go up against some Sun Belt teams that use triple option concepts. Fantastic. So there is some potential that my, John Summerall is good against the option thing that's been in my notebook year after year after year. Maybe that does end up helping Tulane power itself to a victory here, but that's why I'm going to take both of these. I think we can cash both of them because if Army wins, and if Tulane's just trying to shorten this game to get out of Dodge, then that also could lend itself to an under as well. So that's why I'm going Army plus 4.5 and the under 45.5.
Chip, every time you have played that song, it's 0-5 against the spread because I
haven't graced your ears with actual Latifah.
Okay,
sing it, then it's different. But I'm taking some risks here in championship week.
0-5 or EC Island 5-0 here. I'm going out on the island. Give me Tulane minus 4.5 at Army. I lean towards the under as well, like Chip said. So you talked about John Summerall and his teams against the option. All I have to say is a game in November, Tulane 35, Navy nothing. Now, I think Army is better than Navy, but obviously Tulane knows how to practice and play against the option. Tulane is 5-1 straight up and against the spread on the road. They are 9-3 against the spread overall. Army, I mean, we talked about this the other week. I don't want to beat a dead horse. Who the heck have they played? They played one decent team and got smoked by Notre Dame. They have played, I think it's 4 bowl-eligible teams. Tulane has played 7. Army is 1-2-1 against the spread against those teams. Tulane is 5-2 straight up and against the spread against bowl-eligible teams. And John Summerall is 2-0 in conference title games. Give me Tulane 27, Army 17. Now, for more of these picks, you go to SportsLine.com and use promo code WINNERS for 60% off an annual plan. It's the best deal you can find, better than what we have advertised on the site. Go to SportsLine.com, use promo code WINNERS for 60% off an annual plan. And once you're a SportsLine subscriber, we have this new Discord, and it's awesome. We have live chats with experts. And Squared, I'm not sure if you're scheduled to be one of the experts that's doing live chats. I'm sure in the next couple weeks.
Yep,
Saturday.
All these games, yeah.
Awesome. So Mike will be on there answering your questions live. Prop Stars was on yesterday. Prop Stars on again today. I think Larry on talking some NFL this week. You'll want to check that out. SportsLine.com, promo code WINNERS for 60% off, and check out our Discord. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the game that pains me more than any in college football this weekend after we hear from one of our sponsors.
Historic rivals with unforgettable seasons meet in a game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA, December 14th on CBS.
All right, listen. I was in Tucson on Saturday. I left at halftime. As I told Chip before the show, it's the first time I've left an Arizona football game before the fourth quarter since 2003 when Arizona played the co-national champions, USC and LSU. Now, Arizona State is not winning the national championship. I'm going to tell you that right now. They are not winning the national championship. But do they have a decent shot of beating Iowa State and going to the college football playoff? Yes, and it makes me nauseous. They're giving away 2.5 points in Jerry World this week, and the total is 50.5 for a game played at noon Eastern on Saturday. Emory, I mean, I don't even know what to say, how to intro this. Tell us who you like.
Well, I like the balance of Arizona State, and I like them indoors with that same balance. Last week, you just saw a team that wanted to play, and a team that decided after the first series, you know what, this ain't gonna work out for us. We out of here. And that was Arizona. Arizona State had something in their minds like, hey, we got a chance to really clinch this thing. And so compared to what we saw, Kansas State just fumbled the game away against Iowa State, in my opinion. Consistently blew opportunity after opportunity, but you have to credit Iowa State for not blowing the chance of getting to this particular spot against the Sun Devils. But because I just like the Sun Devils offense, I like their balance, I like how they play aggressively on defense. The energy is there on both sides of the ball, so I'm taking the Sun Devils.
Mike, unfortunately, I guess you're going to agree, huh?
Yeah, I got to agree here. I love the way this team's playing right now. I love they're extremely well coached. I love the energy. I just think this team's got more energy across the board. As Emory mentioned, they're extremely well balanced too. I think the running game is going to have a ton of success here in this matchup. And Iowa State, a team that, you look, they've been fine and they've been good over the last few years, but I don't think they're a team that's really going to contend when you have to score quite a few points here. So I think Arizona State is just going to be able to do enough offensively that it would take just a really nice performance from Iowa State. I think they're capable of it, but I really think this number should be the other side of 3. I think it should be 3.5 or 4. The fact that it's less than a field goal for Arizona State, I think is a really good setup for them.
Chip, we are all Cyclones this week, aren't we?
I think the injury of Jordan Tyson matters quite a bit. I think that this is something that really makes Arizona State a bit more one-dimensional. And here's why. Because it's not one-dimensional pass run. It's one-dimensional as in that one dimension is Cam Scatterbo. Now, he is phenomenal. He is excellent. But here is the way it goes. So Jordan Tyson leads Arizona State in receiving with 75 catches, 1,101 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Among wide receivers, because of course Cam Scatterbo is second, that means we drop from 75 to 17 for number 2. We dropped from 1,101 to 291 and from 10 touchdowns to 3. Now, meanwhile, let's check in on the health, availability, and production of those Iowa State. Well, oh, look, there's 2 1,000-yard receivers. How about that? Because Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel is a fantastic way that Rocco Bex can attack this Arizona State defense, and they got to go get a touchdown drive. Because in conference championship week, well, look at the board, look at the spread. All the spreads on the board, they're all close. It means that there's going to be a moment in every single conference championship game where you're breaking the huddle, you're sending the offense out, and you're saying, you got to go get this done. I think Arizona State has more counters thanks to having healthier skill position players. And while it terrifies me to be on the opposite side of one of the most intense competitors in all of college football in Cam Scatterbo, I do think that Iowa State can be poised to win this game. I will take the Cyclones to win and the 2.5.
So my best bet this week is the under 50.5. And it's the best stat that I've read all week, that when Matt Campbell, a coach of Iowa State, is an underdog historically, his teams are 40, 21, and 1 to the under. Sounds good to me. Iowa State, great defense, 3rd best in the nation against the pass. And I think ASU will not do much, obviously, based on losing Jordan Tyson. Do they have that weapon in the passing game that scares anyone? No. Iowa State just has to work on their run defense because it's been pretty bad this year. You know what ASU is going to do. They're going to run. I think Iowa State only giving up less than 20 points a game this year. ASU 21.5 points. And when the Big 12 title game is played at a neutral site, unfortunately, the favorite has won 12 straight games outright.
If you just take it to new era Big 12 title games, which has just been since like 2017 or something, this like Jerry World noon slate, under is 6-1. And the only one that popped was an overtime game when Kansas State beat TCU back in 2022.
So let's hammer that under 50.5. Give me ASU, unfortunately, to win 24-21 over Iowa State. Let's talk about a game where the MAC championship. Now, this is an Emory special. I feel like we have Ohio U against Miami of Ohio, who's giving 3.5 points as the favorite. The total is 44.5. But Mike, we are going to start with you on this one because you have a pick on the total.
Yeah, I'm going to go under at 44.5. I think there are a number of scenarios where this thing lands, honestly, as low as 31, but really between 37 and 41 here. When I look at Ohio, they're really good run defense. So they're going to be able to stop the run or at least allow those drives to be slow and methodical. And then when you look on them offensively, they're very good running the football. They want to run the football. We should see the clock moving a lot in this one. I think we see drives that have 1 to 2 first downs, but don't ultimately land in the red zone pretty frequently in this matchup. So I like the under. Again, 44, a very, very key number in football games in general. But I think this plays closer to NFL style in terms of numbers. So I think we're live to see 37-41. I'll go under 44.5.
Chip, this game, the spread's kind of moving around a little bit. It was 2.5, then it was 3, now it's 2. Which way are you leaning?
When Chuck Martin has your number, you're done. I mean, like when Chuck Martin has that book, I mean, just look at Chuck Martin on the sidelines. Doesn't he just look like a football coach from 1994? I mean, that man has not decided to update his look, his hairstyle, but he still coaches some damn good ball. And so I looked at the Bowling Green game going into last week, and it was like, man, Chuck Martin just might have his number. And I know that Ohio has gone through some coaching transitions, but I kind of think that Chuck Martin's got the book on how to stop an Ohio team that has just been absolutely on fire. I'm going to go Miami. I will lay the 3, and then I will also join Mike on under 44.5.
But Emory, you and I, we don't always agree on things, but I think on this one, we're feeling pretty good about the Bobcats.
This is a broadcaster's dream because this game's going to be over in probably about 2.5 hours, which is ideal because you get back on the flight, you get back home, you get back to watch that late night game. But in terms of this one, Chuck Martin is a fantastic coach. And so his team will always be well-disciplined. They won't beat themselves. They will be assignment sound and gap sound, everything that makes them tough to beat. And which is why they almost beat Northwestern earlier in the year. And they have a fun quarterback in Brett Gabbert that does a great job of playing above the X's and O's. But Ohio, to me, the point of attack play is going to be the difference here. I think they could lean on this defense here for the Red Hawks and do a great job of shrinking this ball game. They're physical on the other side of the football as a byproduct. So I like the Bobcats here with this short number to get the job done and move on.
And I'm going to take Ohio on the money line at plus 130. That number might have come down a little bit since when I saw it earlier this morning. But we're talking about a team that's 0-5 in conference championship games. They're due. I mean, I know that's not a great logic. Miami won this game last year. But Ohio, this means more to them, I feel like. We're looking at 2 of the top 3 scoring defenses in the conference, both giving up less than 19 points a game. But Ohio has the best rushing defense in the league, giving up less than 99 a game, and best rushing offense in the conference at more than 210 yards per game. I love the revenge angle from earlier this season when Miami won this game 30-20. But since then, Ohio is 5-0 straight up and against the spread. Every single game, they've won by 17 or more points. Also, underdogs 11-3-1 against the spread in MAC championship games since 2008. Ohio 23, Miami of Ohio 16. I'm calling the upset. Now for the biggest game of the day, the one that everybody's going to be talking about on Saturday. It's the rematch of Georgia and Texas. Texas is a 2.5-point favorite in Atlanta with the total at 49.5. The game will be at 4 p.m. Eastern. All right, so this game we saw Georgia go into Austin in October and whoop up on them. And Chip, you're not going to take a side in this one, as Mike Emory and I are, which is fine. Which way are you leaning in the first half? A Chip special.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think for the 9th time this season, I am targeting the SEC game of the week and going with the first half under. And I swear, anecdotally, that it feels like these things are like 6-2 or 7-2. The idea that we've got these defenses that are ahead of the offenses, and I think that is the case for both Georgia and Texas. The fact that we've got coaches that are maybe going to want to try to make sure they don't let their quarterbacks make mistakes early in both cases. And yet we do have enough elite skill and speed that when you start getting a little bit more risky, when you try to maybe hit that big shot later in the game, you could flirt with going over the total. So yeah, once again, I'm back on my, I'm going to go first half under 25.5 for Georgia, Texas.
It would not be a college football pick show if Chip wasn't picking a first half. I was just waiting for that. Now, we're not doing best bets or dog of the week, so we won't get Mike's first quarter play, but maybe you'll throw in something at some point as we go along here. But Mike, you are going to give us a spread play on this game, maybe a team that you would bet also in the first quarter. Do tell.
Yeah, I'm going to back Georgia here. Georgia, they maybe shouldn't have beat Georgia Tech to even be in this particular position, but they did. And this game against Texas, all that you're going to hear about and think about is that what they did, right, in that matchup. I think that what they did in that matchup against Texas was impressive defensively, just incredibly impressive. 3.4 yards per play is what Texas managed in that game. 3.4 yards per play, not per run, per play, like entirely in that game. Now the fact they're in a comfortable environment, it's a comfortable environment in Atlanta where they're familiar. They play there every year. I think this is a decent spot to back them. You know, you had the big emotional win in 8 overtimes there. Texas, I wanted them to be awesome. I loved them to start the season. I was extremely high on them. I admittedly was too high on them. I'm not so sure that they're just so much better than Georgia here. And the fact that Georgia is just still alive in this particular spot and now could potentially go earn a bye, I think that this is a good spot to back Kirby Smart. If there's anyone that can figure it out when the back is against the wall, he's the man that I trust personally here. So I like Georgia plus 2.5. Definitely if you can still find a 3.
Emory, do you side with Mike or are you going the other way?
Definitely going the other way. And what I like about this matchup is you have the defensive coach versus the offensive coach. And if you look at that first matchup, like Mike mentioned, this was Georgia's defense winning this ball game. And now we have a few weeks of Quinn Ewers removed from coming back because of the oblique. And what we learned along the way to this point is that Arch Manning and his dual threat capability has a role in this game against Georgia. We may see him get utilized like a Haynes King in this game against Georgia in certain scenarios to run the football. I think the offense will play a lot better because the defense, nothing Georgia does offensively scares you if you are Texas. You feel like you can match up against Georgia's offense. You can get after their quarterback. They really can't run the football with any type of consistency or effectiveness. All you have to do if you're Texas on offense is to not, the bed like you did in the first matchup, where Quinn Ewers couldn't get out of the pocket, would refuse to get out of the pocket, and the offensive line had its worst day possible of the season. If you just neutralize that, Texas has the better offensive talent, has the better team. I think they beat Georgia, and we may even see this game a third time. I know casuals only want to see this game played 5 times a year, but this is why you have to really regulate some of these guys getting into the postseason.
I don't even know where to go from there, but fair enough. I'm going Texas as well, Emory. I'm on your side here. Give me that revenge angle as well. Kirby Smart hasn't been all that great in SEC championship games. Now, I know he's not facing Nick Saban, but then again, Sark did work for Nick Saban, like Kirby Smart did at one point. So we'll roll with that. Kirby Smart 2-4 straight up and 3-3 against the spread in these SEC title games. 0-2 straight up as an underdog, though. And Georgia against the spread this year has been pitiful. 3-9. I just don't think the Bulldogs have been the same team since they went into Austin and smacked around the Longhorns. I'm going Texas and that defense, which hasn't given up more than 17 points more than I think it's only twice in back-to-back weeks. Georgia and Vandy scored more than 17 against Texas. Georgia won't do it this time. Texas 23, Georgia 17. So coming up next, we have the 3 final games on Saturday. And I think Emory's going to be mad at me, but I have a stat. As to why there might be another EC Island after we hear from one of our sponsors. All right, here it is. This is the game that Emory has been waiting for. We're going to talk about Marshall and Louisiana in the Sun Belt Championship. Louisiana, Emory's alma mater where he played, is giving 5.5 points with a total of 56.5. And the game will be played at Cajun Field on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. All right, Emory, you're going to start us off. Why are you taking your guys laying that almost a touchdown?
The last time these teams played, I believe, or it was 2 years ago in the New Orleans Bowl before we were conference mates. Man, you talk about a Cajuns team that had Osiris Torrance, Imani Bailey, and Montrell Johnson on the team playing football. That's crazy. That's 3 NFL players, right? But you look at now, you got a 3-headed monster in the backfield. Chandler Fields, the quarterback, has stepped up in replace of Ben Woolridge, who was injured. But you still have an NFL offensive lineman in A.J. Gilly. You have an NFL wide receiver in Lance Lejeune, and a defense that's playing solid football now than they were when they played against Tulane and lost that game early in the year. But Marshall has an excellent defensive end in Mike Green, 16 sacks on the season. And you know what that tells me is that, hey, we're going to see how much you want to stop the run. The Cajuns do a fantastic job of running the football. You're about to learn a lot about Bill Davis. You're about to learn a lot about this depth in the backfield. Can Mike Green stop the run? They're going to turn their best pass rusher into a run defender. Can you consistently get off blocks and stop the downward pressure of the Cajuns? That's going to be an issue. So that's why I'm laying the points with the Raging Cajuns, because they can switch it up. If you want to play the passing game, they got weapons. If you want to line up and play a physical game, a foot below sea level, they can do that too. So I like the Cajuns' run game here against Marshall.
Mike.
I'm just with Emory here. This is all out of respect to Emory. The computer makes the number 7 here a little bit of an edge on the 5.5, but I'm not going to come on here and say the Raging Cajuns aren't going to roll, because I do know one thing about them. I like their ground game. I think they're going to be able to control a little bit of possession here, and I think they're going to have their way. So I am on Louisiana here, mostly out of respect to Emory. I'm not going to play it, but would lean that way.
Chip, the SportsLine model has Louisiana winning this game by 2 touchdowns. Do you think they can win by 6 points?
Yes. This is about being comfortable in your shoes. This is about being happy where you are. Because you know who really is like fully invested and happy where he is right now? Louisiana head coach Michael DeSormo. You know who might not be? Marshall head coach Charles Huff. Because there's listen to the words I say, and then there's also recognizing the noise around what's going on, because it is widely, and I mean widely reported, that Charles Huff is potentially in the mix to take over the job at Southern Miss. Now, he's sent all the notes apps to all the insiders, and he's denied it all. I'm only focused on where I am. But it would be easy, if you were in that locker room, to wonder whether or not your head coach is going to be around next year. And that ain't the deal with the Cajuns. That is a man who is invested in having this program. Like they always talk about close the gap, right? That is like one of their phrases that they use internally in the program. Like we're trying to close the gap with the very best. And he's not popping off, criticizing the selection committee. He's not sending tweets at other coaches and athletic directors. He is focused on winning the Sun Belt Championship, because that is something that matters to him and to the Louisiana football program. Cajuns minus 5.5. Don't look back.
Emory, there's one team in the country who is 11-1 this season against the spread. Who is it?
It's probably the Cajuns.
It is the Marshall Thundering Herd, 11-1 against the spread. This is a team that looked down and out at halftime last week. They were down 17-0 at James Madison. They came back. They won in double overtime. Now they're in this game. Marshall's played a difficult, slightly more difficult schedule, and they went on the road the last 2 weeks with their backs against the wall. Braylon Braxton, as the starter for Marshall, a quarterback, 7-0 this season, with a 17-2 total touchdown to interception ratio, with 4 rushing touchdowns as well. You talked about Mike Green, Emory, but in Braxton starts, Marshall is averaging 37 points a game. Not only am I taking the points, I apologize, Emory, this is not done on purpose. I'm taking Marshall 31, Louisiana 28. This is an EC Island pick. We're on our second EC Island pick of the day. I can't go against a team that is 11-1 against. I just can't.
I will say this. If Charles Huff goes to Southern Miss, that's scary, because y'all don't remember what Southern Miss used to be.
I do.
Yeah, you remember, like, nobody wanted to play Southern Miss. Southern Miss was beating everybody. Bama, didn't matter who it was. Southern Miss, you did not want Southern Miss. That's a sleeping giant program. So I hope he stays at Marshall, because, man, Southern Miss down the street from us in Hattiesburg would be a problem.
Well, I think it's going to be a problem with Charles Huff and Marshall this week, just because I love that against the spread number. I can't pick against that team who's 11-1. All right, let's talk about the second marquee game of the day. Actually, it might be the number one marquee game of the day. It's on CBS. Chip, you will be in Indianapolis this weekend. Penn State and Oregon. Oregon is only a 3.5-point favorite with a total 49.5. All right, you're going to be out there, Chip. You're getting on the plane here in the next 24 hours. Which way are you leaning?
I'm going to go Ducks. I will lay the 3.5. I think that this is a matter, like I said earlier, of you need to decide with these tight spreads whether you think they can win the game. And I think that the winner of this game needs to be a team that can go out there and get you the score when you need it the most. because right now I have seen this Oregon team in not every single game, because obviously there have been some games that have been just total sweat free, but even in games that they win by 18, 19, 21 points, there are moments where it's really close. And you can tell that Dan Lanning and this coaching staff and Dylan Gabriel and this offense, they take the field and they say, you know what, we need to go score right now. Consider back in Ann Arbor, Tez Johnson goes out with a shoulder injury. They've got that like fumble muff on the return that sets up Michigan with a short field. They score. All of a sudden, the big house is alive. Are we going to take down number one? And then zip, 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 zip. Dylan Gabriel just touchdown drive, touchdown drive, touchdown drive. They have answers at every turn when it comes to that scoring drive that you need. There was only one game that didn't happen, and that was in the Wisconsin game, which I will grant them the grace of it being their 8th game in a row without a bye, because they came out of that off week and put the absolute work in on Washington. Again, a game where early on, Washington gets a stop, gets a score. Okay, what's this going to look like? Zip, 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 zip. They've got the answers. They can score faster. Give me the Ducks -3.5.
Emory, you're on the same side as Chip.
Listen, Oregon looks like a Big Ten team when they were in the Pac-12. And now that they're playing in the Big Ten, they have that level of size on both sides of the ball and explosiveness, and a quarterback that's senior plus, that's playing out of his mind, playing really good football to help lead this team. They are probably the most complete, most balanced team in college football. That's why they're number one, unthreatened, in terms of never really been a question of whether or not Oregon is up there top 2 at least, but at least we know they're number one, and they play like it. And we've seen Coach Lanning play in coach in big games, and there's still that thing out there for Coach Franklin and Penn State in big games. Now this would be a great chance to shut everybody up. But, man, Oregon is just too strong of an opponent, and I think they'll take care of business.
Mike, is this line fishy to you that it's only 3.5?
No, I think it should be 3.5 or 4. I think that Penn State, while they typically don't end up winning bigger games like this, they're always really good because they're so good defensively, right? I think both of these teams are good defensively. I think if either team has a little bit of a weakness, it might actually be the offensive line. So I think the defenses could win out a little bit here. I will take Penn State with the 3.5. I was a little skeptical of Oregon. I know they went on the road to Wisconsin in that spot, only won that game 16-13, but that opened the eyes a little bit there that a good defensive team at times, not that Wisconsin's a great defensive team, but could slow this offense down. We saw a higher scoring game against Ohio State, 32-31. But to me, I think this is going to be competitive. And you look at what Penn State did. They held Ohio State. I know Ohio State just lost to Michigan. I get that. They held that Ohio State team to 20 points in that game. They were live to go win that game as well. So I just think this is a competitive game and one that, gives them a great opportunity. Now, the question that I want to pose to you guys here is, if you're Penn State, do you really want to win this game? Let's assume that Texas beats Georgia. If you're Penn State, do you want to win this game the way everything is set up? Because if they win this game the way it's set up, who are they going to play? They get the bye, obviously, but who are they going to play after that? But if they lose this game and they stay put, if you look at where the bracket is right now, they would play Arizona State as a home game. What do you think the spread would be there? I think it would be a minimum of 10.
So I'm glad you asked this. I think you should always want the bye. I think that trying to game out the way the bracket is going to break, I would rather not have the risk of injury. We are talking about games number 14, 15, 16 of the season, and you're already, in some cases, just like, these guys are gutting it out with like duct tape holding these ligaments together. So I would rather have, especially if I play on Conference Championship Saturday, because think about it, Tennessee gets an off week. Indiana's getting an off week. Ohio State gets an off week. So if I am playing on this Saturday, there's no do I want to win? Yes, I want to win. I want the bye. I want the extra time to get ready for my first playoff game.
Right. Because at the end of the day, you have the committee that's probably out for blood, and they'll schedule your first game in the first round against Georgia. So you can go out the frying pan into the fire. So you got to win so you get that bye. I agree with Chip there.
Yeah, I think you definitely want to win. I think that if they don't win, though, I think they're, in terms of the math, they have a better chance of reaching the semifinal. And the reason for that is the way it stands currently, they would play Arizona State. That would be a 10-point spread, roughly. That translates to a money line around -410, -430 range. They would be about the same in that next game, which is how it currently stands as a bye, the bye team, which is Boise State. So they would get a home game against Arizona State and then play Boise State, where they would also be that 10-point favorite once again. Parlay those together, that translates to -186. If they draw Tennessee or Ohio State, they're not -186. They're +170. It's just an interesting scenario here, which is further argument for why you must reseed the teams.
100%.
Must reseed the teams, because you talked about Tennessee as well. Yes, Tennessee currently would play Ohio State, but certain teams like that, like look at Notre Dame right now. Notre Dame, they're not going to play this week because there's no conference. So they get the bye there. They can't get the bye, but they really got the bye because they got the week off. They get a home game. And then it's just, there's so many little advantages here. I think you have to reseed. My whole point on all of this was it's an argument that you must reseed the teams.
100% agree. But also, Mike, I really like where your head's at with Penn State. It's not my official play. I'm going the under 49.5. But, I mean, listen, James Franklin, Emory mentioned it. 1-13 against top 5 teams, only win in 2016 against the Buckeyes. They're 0-5 straight up and 1-4 against the spread as an underdog since 2022. But it's more of a kind of a gut feeling here. Wisconsin gave the kind of the game plan to beat Oregon. They just didn't have the talent to do it. They had a bad quarterback. No offense, Braden Locke, but he's not Drew Aller. I think there's just a weird feeling that we're going to see chaos on Saturday, and this is where the chaos comes in. Lower scoring game, 2 really good defenses. Penn State 23, Oregon 20. And then we'll see Penn State in the Rose Bowl. Oregon will be the 5 seed. Oregon will either play Boise State or ASU in the Fiesta Bowl, and they'll probably get to the semifinals that way as well. Just kind of a hunch play there about that. All right, our last game we're going to talk about, the ACC championship game, one we kind of alluded to earlier. Clemson, who probably shouldn't be in this game, they kind of backdoored their way in because Miami gave it to them.
7-1 in conference play. What do you mean shouldn't it be? Yeah.
They lost the last week. I know it was against South Carolina. They didn't belong in this.
Do you know who didn't go 7-1 in conference play? Miami.
Clemson shouldn't sniff the playoffs with 3 losses, including a 34-3 loss to Georgia. And we're not talking like an elite Georgia team on top of losing to South Carolina this weekend. Nonetheless, they're only a 2.5-point underdog on Saturday night with a total of 55.5. Emory, this is Emory Island here. Who you got?
If was a fifth, we'd all be drunk, right? If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, every day would be Christmas, right? Any one of those saying. If Miami had defense, they'd be SMU. Like, SMU is explosive on offense, but they can play defense. So this is going to be a tough matchup for Clemson. Honestly, all jokes aside, this is going to look exactly like the South Carolina game because they pose some of the same challenges South Carolina did against this Clemson defense. And you add the fact that nobody is giving SMU respect, and no one is talking about them in the sense of supposed to be here. But this is an ACC team. They have the biggest bag. Unfortunately, we don't get the Escobar money versus the oil money bowl that we were supposed to see with Miami and SMU, but we'll get that in conference play at some point in time. But this year, we're going to get SMU paying their way into this moment, and they're going to seize this moment. And I think SMU is going to, try to run it up against Clemson. I like them big. I'm taking the Mustangs.
All right. Mike, I teased it with Emory Island. So Clemson, why the Tigers?
Look, I made the number -2 here, right? So no edge. I'm not playing this one. I'm leaning towards Clemson because I am all for the chaos. Look, I came on this show last week and we talked about, look at these 2 teams here. I said, look at Clemson and look at Alabama. One of those 2 teams is going to find their way in. Here we are. There's a scenario where they both find their way in. And that is what everyone with mega college football bucks wants to see. We want to see Clemson. We want to see Alabama. But I think this game is just so important to Dabo and that program. He's got an opportunity to save this season and not save his job. His job wasn't in jeopardy, but like that program with the new look college football with the transfer portal, NIL, it's just kind of potentially getting left behind a little bit because of some of their philosophies. Dabo has a massive opportunity here to win this game, put himself in the college football playoff, and really make some noise there. And because of the seeding, the way things work out, they could have a relatively friendly matchup in the first round of the playoff as well. Cade Klubnik, he's someone we talked about having some upside. I mean, he entered the Heisman conversation for a week or two, right? You've still got Phil Maffa there. You've still got a team that is decent defensively. So I just think this game is so important to Dabo and this team. Because my number is 2, I will take the 2.5. I will root for the chaos. I think we all want that chaos on Sunday for that selection show. If Clemson wins this football game, there will be a lot of chaos.
Emory, what did you call that SMU Miami game?
The Bag Bowl.
Yeah.
Bag Bowl. Good news. Next year in Dallas, we're going to see the Bag Bowl, or we're going to see Miami at SMU.
Who has the most money?
Yeah, there you go. It's going. SMU will I'm sure show out for that one. Chip, Clemson, SMU. What do you got?
Yeah, it'll be great because then SMU will actually play the top teams in the ACC, unlike this year when they beat up on all the bad teams to get 8-0 in conference play. It's amazing. Everyone picks SMU as the dark horse in July, but no one's ever talking about, I mean, at that time they were talking about Preston Stone, which, obviously has been turned over to Kevin Jennings. And they were also like, and they've got the easiest schedule draw. And that was before we knew that Florida State was the first ever 17th place team in the ACC. Shout out to Florida State, the time slot champs, first ever 17th place team in the ACC. This is a home game. This is a home game for the Clemson Tigers. Dabo Swinney is 7-0 in Bank of America Stadium. Clemson has won 8 ACC titles dating back to 2011. The fans, I've been in that stadium so many times where the orange packs it out. They know exactly the hotels where to stay. They come in the day of the game because the upstate is only 2.5 hours away. They set up great tailgates. They party. They're loud. It is going to be a home game. And look, SMU has big pocketed boosters, but that's still a small school. And their number of, and like, I'm sure that they're going to have one of the greatest collections of alumni in a single place ever. But like, guess who else did that at Bank of America Stadium? Wake Forest for a Belk Bowl. I just think we're dealing with numbers here that are going to be extreme vibes advantage for the Clemson Tigers, a team whose season was seemingly dead and then brought back to life by the Syracuse Orange. Give me the Tigers plus 2.5.
So, Chip, I got a stat for you. You gave out the Dabo Swinney record in conference championship games. Phenomenal. He's won 8 straight, something like that. 7-2 against the spread. I get it. But over the last decade, teams entering a conference championship on a 3 or more game against the spread losing streak are actually 7-0 straight up and against the spread in those title games. I think it's going to be 8-0. I think Clemson wins this game outright, and there is the chaos that we get. Now, if it's a close game, I think SMU belongs over Alabama. It would be an outrage. If you're going to put Indiana in, as I said earlier, you got to put SMU in if they lose close. If they don't, we can have the conversation. All right. Let's get a final word from each of you about any of these games, anything in college football. Mike, I'm going to start with you. Anything related to college football, give me your final word.
I'm here for the chaos. I'm rooting for Clemson. I want to see what this committee does, and I think it needs to happen just to see what the precedent is set, and then we can really evaluate this entire process and make it better going forward. My only hope is that we're not locked into this already again for next season. My hope is that logic can prevail and we can just start to, like the reseeding thing, for example. Let's lock that in for next year right now, right? So that's it for me. I think that we're going to see a lot of great football. And like I said, one of Alabama or Clemson is getting in this playoff, just like I said a week ago.
Emory, what do you got?
Imagine if everyone that won their conference championship this weekend got a chance to go to the postseason. Imagine the conversations around every one of these conference championship games. We see it at the FCS level more exclusively because I covered that a lot, where you see the Missouri Valley Conference gets talked about like the SEC, the CAA is like the Big Ten, the Big Sky is like the ACC, and those conferences in the 2014 playoff generally has 3 to 4 teams in. Sometimes we see 5 CAA teams get in if they're good enough. But that doesn't mean the other teams and the Pioneer, the Patriot, the Southland don't get their one team, their auto bid in, and have a chance at the table. That's all we're asking for. If you're going to make it a playoff, make it a full playoff. 20 teams, 24 teams. If you want to continue to add all the SEC teams in, do so. But at least make sure every conference champion gets a chance to say, hey, we got a shot at the national title.
Emory, one last thing. You love to give out FCS picks. I know you're giving those out all weekend on CBS Sports HQ, CBS Sports Network. When can people get your 6-pack of FCS picks?
Tomorrow, early edge on CBS Sports Network at noon Eastern time. I'll even give you a teaser. SWAC championship game this weekend. TC Taylor, the head coach at Jackson State, took over for Coach Prime. Prime said, hey, make him the head coach. They made him the head coach. They were 8-0 in SWAC play. They take on Southern, who took care of Grambling in the Bayou Classic last weekend. Take Jackson State to knock out Southern and go and play Chinnisberry in South Carolina State in the Celebration Bowl.
All right. And there you go. I love it. That's great. We're going to be betting the Celebration Bowl, probably talking about it on next week's show. Chip, what do you got?
I legitimately have enjoyed doing this every week with you guys. You guys are the best. Jake the Snake crushes it, getting all this organized. And while we are about to enter the silly season, that is the postseason, college football for me is based on these Saturdays in the fall. It is not a playoff. It is a college football playoff invitational. It is a big beauty pageant television show. The actual sport is coming to a conclusion this weekend. And so I've really enjoyed breaking it all down. You know that I'm going to be able to just rip off bowl thoughts and bowl picks left and right, because that's just what we do. But especially in this era of opt-outs, especially in this era of the transfer portal, and especially with a college football playoff that is determined by 13 individuals, some of them not even related to the game of football whatsoever, that what is decided on the field in the regular season is why I love this sport. So I love breaking it down every week with y'all.
And likewise, Chip, it's an honor to be on with all three of you and to talk about this. We've done this 15 straight weeks, and we have more shows to go, so can't wait. Just a couple of thoughts from here. Iowa State, please. Marshall, sorry, Emory, please, because I'm going to probably put a few bucks on that 11-1 trend. Guys, always a great show, a lot of fun. Should be a very entertaining 9 games plus the FCS games, as Emory will tell us more about on Early Edge on Thursday morning on CBS Sports Network. So for Chip Patterson, Mike McClure, and Emory Hunt, I am Eric Cohen. And as I always like to say, let's hit it big. Good luck.